I'm going to have only two featured games here, so I'll put them both together in this one video because they're both rather short. And this one we're going to look at is between Anthony Conyers playing white. He's rated 1956, and he's playing Jim Bennett, who's rated 1824. Now, Anthony ended up tying for first, and we're going to see the little bit of luck was involved in this decision. He starts out with d4, knight f6, bishop g5, and this should probably disqualify him from tying for first. Okay, never mind. Bishop f4, d5. I think c5 is a little more testing, and it's quite delicious. But d5, e3, e6, bishop d3, knight to d7, bishop takes on e4, d takes on e4, and now knight to e2 is, believe it or not, a novelty. f5, knight to d2, and now bishop to d6 was played. Let's just pop back. The most common move that you'll see here is bishop to e7. And after castles, the threat is to push on g5. So f3, so the bishop has a place to go if that happens. Pawn takes on f3, knight takes, and then b6. With the bishop coming to b7, I think that black has a fully equal game here. Okay, but let's go back to our game, where knight to d2 had been played, now bishop to d6. Bishop takes, pawn takes, knight f4, knight f6, queen to e2, castles, white castles long, shows a fighting spirit. He wants to go throwing everything up the king side at him. Bishop to d7, f3. Now e5 was played, and I think that's a bit of a mistake. But let's go back and take a look at what he should have played. Since white castled on the queen side, it makes more sense to just play rook to c8 right away. Put your rook opposite the enemy king, and good things will happen. And after fe4, I think black's a bit better here. Well, hell, I'd prefer to have black, to be honest with you. The bishop and knight are not a great combo, but in this case, I think that with black being able to throw the A and B pawns up the board, he certainly has equal chances. In our game, though, he played e5, pawn takes on e5, pawn takes, and now queen to c4 with a dead level game, if black played king to h8. He did not. He played rook to f7. Why walk into a pin? I don't understand this. King to h8 seemed more logical, and then after knight to e6, probably what Jim didn't see is that he could play a really neat move here. He could play b5. If he takes the queen, then pawn takes queen. The knight has to run out somewhere to b7 is the only place. Now c3 I think is a good move. It's going to fracture white's pawn structure. Pawn takes on f3, gf3, bishop to e6 hitting the a pawn, c4, and rook fc8. And though white is a pawn ahead, he's got several ugly pawns to contend with, and I think black will easily pick up one or two of those pawns along the way. The position is quite equal here. So we're going to pop back in this variation where b5 had been played, and we were just looking at knight takes d8. What if he goes to b3? Well, then we take the knight, queen takes, and then rook to c8. And again, I think the black is just totally equal here. Yeah, white can grab the e-pawn, but it's of little consequence. But back in our game, rook to f7 was played, and now knight to e6. And now he plays bishop takes knight. And I think this is just being too compliant with his opponent. I think queen to c8 makes more sense, hitting the queen. And if knight to g5, then queen takes queen, and that pin on that rook on f7 is no longer there. And now rook to e7. And this is, again, just a dead level game. Back in our game, though, he played bishop takes knight, queen takes, and I think white's a bit better here. Black's got these weak pawns to deal with. Here, I think that he should play queen to d7. He did not. He played queen to a5, and I think this was his plan as a way to create counterplay, but I don't think it's all that great. I think that queen to d7 was a better idea. And there's a couple choices. If white just runs away, this might actually be a good idea. Queen to c7. Note, you don't want to take on f3 here because of knight takes, and this knight's coming into either e5 or g5, taking advantage of that pin that I mentioned earlier. So queen to c7 is the wisest move. Fe4, fe4, knight to c4. And I think that white is clearly better here, but I think this is better than what happens in the game. Still, in this variation here, after queen to d7, instead of queen to b3, you can play queen takes e5. And now rook to e7, queen a5, and b6. And I think white's a little better here, but not by much. So queen to d7 deserves some merit. Instead, he played queen to a5. And I think that white should just calmly slide his king over to b1. A very typical type maneuver. But he did not. He played knight to b3. And here I think black missed the chance to equalize. He plays queen to b6, which is the general idea of defense here. But I think he could have grabbed the pawn. And after fe4, fe4, rook h to f1, queen to a6, queen takes e5, rook to c8. Material's equal because black did grab the pawn on a2. And the pieces for both sides have about equal power, so it looks like a pretty level game here. However, back in the game, he did not take on a2, and it's understandable why go pawn grabbing when things could just all of a sudden break loose, but we saw there that it was actually pretty safe. Plays queen to b6, and now rook to d6 is played. And I'm not sure this is the best idea here. So I think trading queens was pretty much a must. But, okay, plays rook to d6. And this allows queen takes e3. Black is clearly for choice here. White has the pin on the rook on f7, but that's his only trump in this position. His knight on b3 is kind of out of play. And though he's got his heavies into the game on the d file, they're not really doing a whole lot. So, king to b1, e takes f3, rook h to d1. And now, a very difficult choice for black here. He plays g6. Let's take a step back. As a matter of fact, for this little quiz here, let's flip the board. So now you have the black pieces. Instead of playing g6, as in the game, can you find a better line for black to play? If you're up to the challenge, pause the video and see what you can come up with here. Okay, I think that what black should do is play rook to e8. And now, what choices does white have? Drop the queen back to c4 and, let black take on g2? That doesn't look real healthy for white. Now, I think that he'd be probably more inclined to play rook to d8 here. Now, here's where you needed to find the critical rejoinder to this line of play. If you want to pause the video again, this might be a good place to pause and see if you can find what black should play. I'll give you that opportunity before I move on. Okay, what he should play is f takes g2. This looks almost suicidal, doesn't it? But after rook takes e8, knight takes e8, giving up a piece with queen takes e8. It's with check. Rook to f8, queen to e6, king to h8. Place where the king should have gone earlier in the game. Queen takes f5. And the point is, if rook takes queen, then rook to d8 is going to end up mating, but he doesn't play that. Again, another place to pause. What is the best move for black here to defend this position? Now, he's a piece for 2 pawns down, but one of those pawns is on g2, ready to promote. So, what do you do here? Pause the video, see what you can come up with. Alright, the answer is queen to f4. It's an x-ray defense of the rook on f8, and if white trades queens, well, that's just hopeless. That pawn on g2 is just too solid. So queen to d7, and now what? Well, now, queen to f1. So if he takes a queen, we promote to a queen. He loses the exchange of a rook for a queen and a pawn. Yeah, if he takes the queen, we just grab it with a pawn, promote, and we're up the exchange and a pawn. So black is doing very well here. It's check, so yeah, knight to c1 would be forced. Yeah, it's not looking very good for white at all. Let's flip the board again. In the game, he went from winning to just being better with g6. And now g takes f3. Rook to e8. White retreats the queen to c4. And now, I don't know why, but black plays b6. Looks like everything's all defended, right? But after b6, he resigned after rook takes f6. Again, that pinned rook on f7 causes his downfall. Okay, this game is not a stellar performance by Anthony, but a win is a win is a win. Since this game was so short, only 24 moves, Anthony was probably in first place, clear and free, and just waiting on the outcome on a couple other boards to see what was happening. As things turned out, Amit Gupta and Rohan Mittal were able to tie for first place, so it was a three-way tie. Now, playing in a 6-round tournament, it's great if you're in form and you're playing well, but it also entails some luck, as we see here. I'll give Anthony credit. He was very well focused through the majority of this tournament. When I was chatting with friends or reviewing games with some players, I'd look over in the corner and there was Anthony sitting there with his, either had a laptop or a smartphone, I can't remember, but he was always studying something. So my hat's off to him for concentrating so hard. Here, Anthony is showing what it takes. You got to sit there and concentrate for all 6 rounds, because one bad move in any one of those games and you're out of the running for the money. So fighting spirit entails dedication, and that'll bring wins. The saying that good players are often lucky, and we see it here. All right, congratulations, Anthony. Tied for first with this win. Jim made it a little easier on you there, but in this position, who knows what's going on if you didn't pick up the knight on f6. It's getting pretty tough. All right, let's go on to our next game. Okay, in our second game, this is also a shorty. I think it's only like 19 or 20 moves. This is from the booster section. It was Patrick Schaffer. It's rated 1061, playing John Coulter. It was rated 1025. All right, they started out with an English, symmetrical, very symmetrical, extremely symmetrical, and too much symmetrical. He plays d5. Now, I notice what the players didn't see in this is the relieving of the tension in the center and when to do it. It's very hard for players at this level to understand that. To break the symmetry at some point, you need to relieve the tension, and I think that c takes d4, knight takes d4, knight takes e takes d4, and then d5. I think that we have a dead level position here, and we're going to see this opportunity missed time and time again over the next 8 moves or so. Instead, he played d5, just playing copycat, and now b3 was played. Again, let's step back. Patrick just seems to be wanting to play for getting his pieces developed and then see what happens from there. But black all this time could be playing c takes d4 and getting into that line that we were just looking at. Now I think that white should take the opportunity here to break the symmetry and play c takes d5. And after c takes d4, dc6, dc3, queen d8, rook d8, c7, rook d7, knight takes c3. I think white has a slight, tiny edge here. But the key thing is that the total symmetrical feel has been broken. Although the pawn structures are symmetrical, the piece placement now will be different at least. Right, that was on c takes d5. Now, if he plays e takes d5, we just play d takes c5, and we got a pawn. So, that's why the tension in the center, I think, should have been broken there, and all during the next few moves. So b3 was played, and now, being a copycat again, b6. Just to point out again, c takes d4, e takes d4, d takes c4. Look, you're building in pressure on the d4 square. This is clearly better. Well, I won't say clearly better. This is better for black. But he misses it. Plays b6. And now c takes d5 should be played. It was not. Bishop b2. C takes d4 should be played. It was not. Bishop b7. Okay, I'm not going to keep repeating myself. These trades should happen during all of these moves. Rook to c1, queen to d7, queen to d2, rook a to d8. Now rook f to d1. Again, all those central trades should have been done during any of these moves. Queen to c8, knight to b5, now queen to b8. Let's take one step back and again look at this central break here with d takes c4, b takes c4, now a6, knight b to c3, cd4, ed4, and knight takes d4. Black is clearly better, and he's a pawn up. So, by not really paying attention to the central pawn breaks, black missed an opportunity there. They both did. To improve their position, they missed the trades in the center. Alright, queen to b8. Now c takes d5 should be played, but knight to f4. And now I think that this is the last chance for him to play d takes c4. He plays e5 here. It's a courageous move, but boy, this really alters the structure and not in a good way for black. Now white plays knight takes d5, and now knight takes d5. Now already, after white's last move, black is in some hot water here. Now knight takes d5 could be considered a mistake, but I think he's already lost. He could have tried a6, and if he'd done this, I don't know that Patrick would have seen this because it's a pretty sharp and deep combination, but it's fun to look at nonetheless. White could play a piece sacrifice. D takes c5. Now a takes b5, c takes b6, knight takes d5. Alright, now white's got 3 pawns for a piece here. C takes d5, but he's got these pawns rolling right into black's camp, which is why I want to show you this variation here. After knight e7, bishop a3 pinning that knight, so black has to do something about it. Rook f e8, breaking the pin and defending the knight at the same time. And d6, hitting the knight once again. And now bishop takes g2, it's the best line. And now not taking the knight nor taking the bishop, but playing d7 here. Now bishop f3 preserves the bishop and hits the rook, but now we can play pawn takes rook, we get a queen, and then rook takes and protecting the knight once again. Now we have a material imbalance of white having a rook and 2 pawns versus 2 pieces. Queen to d7, and after bishop takes d1, rook takes d1, we have built-in pressure on this knight here. Now the best way to defend it is with bishop to f8, but it can transpose after knight f5 as well. And after b7 here, bishop f8, this is just going to transpose. So we'll go back to our main line here of defending the knight with bishop f8 first. And now b7, knight f5. Now he's hitting that bishop on a3. But rook to c1, just ignoring that the bishop is hit, because if bishop takes bishop, you have queen takes e8, queen takes e8, and then rook to c8, and that pawn is going to promote. But jumping back a little in this variation, he could try rook to d8, and after rook to c8, he can take the queen, we can take the queen. He can't play bishop takes bishop because it's pinned. but he can try rook takes b7. A very interesting try, but it falls a bit short. After rook takes rook, bishop takes a3, and rook takes b5. And this leads to a tough ending, but a winning ending for white. Now, of course, all of that is very difficult to see from the game position here. Probably downright impossible. But it's in there. So if you have time, it's worth it to look and calculate such lines. They're crazy, but we saw that that worked out. But, I mean, try and figure that final position from here. It's not so easy. Because let's take a look at that final position. Do you got it in your head? Well, if you do, this is what it should look like. Okay. Just wanted to point out that variation because it's very pretty. Alright, so he plays knight takes d5. And now Patrick returns the favor. He should now play c takes d5. He did not. He played bishop takes d5. But let's step back for a moment. C takes d5 was still winning, because after knight to e7, that pawn still comes marching up the board like crazy, and he doesn't want to play bishop takes g2 because a pawn takes and we're forking the rooks. So he's got to move the knight, so knight f5, and now d takes e5. And white's got a winning advantage. He's 2 pawns up, he's dominating the center. It's a very wonderful position for white here. Going back to our game, though, Patrick played bishop takes d5, and after e takes d4, the position is completely level. Absolutely level. White recaptured, and now with knight takes d4 here, things are still level. But we come to one of those inexplicable things in chess, and black plays bishop to h6. And I cannot explain why. Just drops a piece. Queen takes h6, c takes d4, knight takes d4, knight takes d4, bishop takes d4, and now bishop takes d5 was played. And I don't know if he just was deciding to give up the game or not, but this game is over after queen to g7 mate. Very strange game where neither side wanted to make any tension breaks in the center early on in the game, and then in the middle game we missed a really neat variation. White should have been winning, white was then equal. In this position, maybe black was not aware that there was a trend reversal and that knight takes d4 would have just led to an equal game. Yeah, strange things happen in this game. Plus, it's a long tournament, it's round 6. You know, I'm sure the players wanted to go home. So, congratulations, Patrick. You scored 6 points, no draws, no losses. That's impressive. Alright, everybody, that's it for the 2012 U.S. Amateur. I am going to be working on the 2012 Ye Old Pueblo Open. In this tournament, we have, I think, 1 Grandmaster, a few IMs, and a lot of experts. Pretty typical for our tournaments here. Then we go from experts to few A players, few B players, and then to C and D players. Alright, but we had some interesting games there, and it's going to be fun bringing those to you. So I hope you stay tuned for those. Until next time, good luck.